Born in 1912 in Fort Scott, Kansas, Gordon Parks was the youngest of 15 children. After the death of his mother, he moved to St. Paul, Minnesota. Parks didn't begin his photography work until 1939. Some of Parks' earliest work was a professional photographer shooting fashion for a department store. This allowed him to photograph for local newspapers, the impoverished South Side of Chicago. This work won him the Roswald Fund Fellowship and allowed him to work with Roy Stryker at FSA. Between this time, he married Sally Alvis and had a son, Gordon Parks Jr. In the same year of the birth of his first daughter, Toni Parks, Gordon began to photograph for various newspapers, including the St. Paul Pioneer Press. In 1940, Parks won the Blue Ribbon Award at the American Negro Exposition. In 1942, Parks began a fellowship at FSA, Farm Security Administration, one of FDR's programs for the New Deal. This program was meant to show the face of America, Americans living during the Great Depression. Staying mostly up north, Parks believed the camera was needed to expose the evils of racism, poverty, discrimination, bigotry by showing the people most suffering under oppression. Parks' work was instrumental in gathering evidence of the nation's social conditions. Parks became the first African American staff photographer and writer for Life magazine. Some of Gordon Parks' photos from 1942 to 1944 are some of the most iconic photos in American history. He was allowed to travel on assignment to Washington, D.C., New England, New York, and many other places. In 1943, Parks worked with the Office of War Information as a photographer. He was tasked with documenting the training at the 332nd Fighter Pilot Group, known as the Tuskegee Airmen, the first African American military aviators in the U.S. Armed Forces. In 1944, with the birth of his second son, David Parks, Gordon began working for Standard Oil Company. A part of Roy Stryker's team, Parks was hired in part as the company had a bad reputation from the muckrakers and wanted to begin a public relations campaign based on offering free, high-quality photos of the American landscape to magazines. Parks was in charge of doing portraits for the company. During the height of his career as a photojournalist, Parks did works for such magazines as Circuit Smart Women, Ebony Life, and Vogue. While in Paris, Parks' job was to photograph many of the scenes of the cities. Parks went from Paris to Portugal to many other areas to show the lives and the people that were being affected by the war. After spending a few years on assignment in France, Parks returned and wrote, directed, and became the first African American to direct a Hollywood film. Parks' filmography includes Shaft, Shaft's Big Score, and Super Cop. The Learning Tree had been placed among the 25 films placed on the National Film Registry of the Library of Congress in 1989. Among the many Parks' achievements includes being the National Medal of Arts in 1988 and being the first African American to write, direct a Hollywood feature film based on his best-selling novel, The Learning Tree. In 1971, Parks directed Shaft. With a $500,000 budget, the film made over $13 million at the box office. Shaft, the movie, follows actor Richard Roundtree as John Shaft, a private detective who is hired to rescue a man's daughter from the Italian mob. The significance of Gordon Parks cannot be misunderstood. He is one of the most influential photographers in modern American history. Until his death in 2006, Parks was a leading figure on Broadway, directing movies, films, and many others. His work is still used today by the likes of Kendrick Lamar and many other popular individuals. Among the many photographs taken by Gordon Parks, his photos include Harlem Gang members, Emerging Men, done in 1952, and probably his most popular photo, American Gothic, done in 1942. Parks has done many photographs with the likes of Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X. Parks is not only one of the most influential African Americans of American history, he is one of, if not the most influential photographers